got some people watching, so I want to get started. I don't want to be too delayed. If you do have the worksheet, we're going to get to that and how you can utilize that during the lesson. Before I get going, I want to make sure you guys have kind of a lay of the land, because I'm here in Key Largo, okay, so the northernmost island here in the Florida Keys, just south of the mainland. All of this yellow that you see here, that is where our coral reef tract is here in the Florida Keys. Now, a few words that I need to make sure that you know and understand. First of all, ecology. Okay, it's important you understand what this vocabulary word means, because ecology is going to explain a lot of what we discussed today. Okay, ecology has two aspects associated with it. The community, the living things, that means like the coral and the fish and the crabs and the lobsters. But the other part of ecology that's just as important are the non-living things, the environmental aspects. So in this case would be the amount of salt in the water, or the oxygen in the water, the temperature of the water. When we're looking at ecology, we're looking at both aspects, the living, the community, and the non-living, the environment. So ecology is the study of the interactions of the community and the environment, okay? The other word that I want to make sure you understand before we move on to coral is reef, okay? The reefs that we're going to be discussing this morning are made of coral, okay? We're talking about coral reefs. But there's all different types of reefs out there, including in our waters here in the Florida Keys. A reef is anything that is underwater, wave resistant, and provides structure. So corals can make reefs, but reefs can also be artificially made by people, like shipwrecks, or reefs can be made out of oysters, okay? If it's underwater, wave resistant, and providing structure, you got yourself a reef. That's how it works. Now, moving on to the coral, the good stuff, okay? Now, some more big words for you. Some of you may have seen this vocabulary word right here before. Others, you may have no idea what it is, and that's okay too. Corals, first of all, are animals. That's something important to note, okay? People get them confused. Sometimes they look like big rocks or they look like plants, but they're definitely animals. And they're in phylum Cnidaria. And if you've never heard of phyla, you don't know what a phylum is, that's okay. It's basically a classification system that scientists use for every species that's ever been identified, okay? So if we know corals are in phylum Cnidaria, we know some characteristics about our corals, because all of the animals within one phylum have shared characteristics. One of the primary shared characteristics of cnidarians is that they have stinging cells, okay? So corals can sting. Some have a harsher sting than others, but they do have those stinging cells associated with them. Cnidarians also tend to have tentacles. You can see all these tentacles reaching out from the polyps. Cnidarians usually have a polyp and a medusa stage. Corals stay in the polyp stage. That's what you're seeing here. A whole bunch of coral polyps, okay? They definitely all have stinging cells. Okay, this brings us to the trivia. As we go through this, I'm going to have some trivia questions for you. Most of it's associated with what we're going to be talking about. When the trivia questions come up, it's going to spin like this. That's when you want to get your game face ready, okay? If you are using the worksheet that we have on our virtual website, you can fill in your questions there. If you just want to scream out the answer loud and proud wherever you're sitting, then go for it, okay? If you want to type in your answers in the little chat box so that I can see them and I can see that you're listening and you're knowing what's going on, then that's cool too. If you want to do a combination of all three, whatever works for you is totally fine with me. So, our first trivia question. Get ready. I want you to name another animal in phylum Cnidaria that lives in the Florida Keys marine ecosystem. Now remember that cnidarians have stinging cells. The other thing that you need to remember is cnidarians are invertebrates, okay? So animals without a backbone. So think about an invertebrate that has stinging cells, something that you think is related to our corals that lives here in the Florida Keys. I'm going to give you a minute to think that one through. Stinging cells. But it can't be a vertebrate, so something not with a backbone. If you are thinking something like a jellyfish or an anemone, then you're on the right track, okay? Those are good examples of cnidarians. Okay, well, let's move on. Back to our corals. Now, corals, you can see this one here. This is a coral polyp, and that's how corals, their general formation is a polyp form, but they're colonial animals. So when you see one polyp, you're generally going to see hundreds and hundreds of polyps, but they're all connected to one another. All of the polyps within one colony are connected through this connective tissue, okay? Now, that can certainly be a good thing, because what if this polyp right here, we'll call him Ernie, is really good at catching plankton and getting his food. And this polyp over here, we'll call him Bob, is really lazy, not so good at getting any food. Through this connective tissue, Ernie can share his food, his energy, with Bob. Bob still gets enough food to live and survive. That's definitely a good thing. Now, the negative of being colonial like this and being able to share things through that connective tissue is that in addition to sharing good things, like food, they can also share some not so good things, like disease. So if Ernie gets sick, okay, gets a disease, that disease can spread very quickly, not only to Bob, but to all of the hundreds of other polyps that are living in that coral colony, okay? That's a problem. That's an issue for our corals. Now, corals do have a pretty good protection against disease. They are covered in a layer of mucus, okay? They're covered in this mucus membrane. It's mucus, kind of like snot, kind of like the stuff that's in your nose, and that's what protects our corals from getting a disease. Now, something to remember, if you guys do get to visit a coral reef, is that you have to be so careful not to touch the coral. You can't kick the coral, stand on the coral, touch the coral even with your fingertip, because if you do, you are wiping away that mucus membrane and you're leaving that coral susceptible to getting a disease. And even if you touch just the teeniest, tiniest bit, remember these coral polyps are teeny tiny, itty bitty. If you just touch one coral polyp and that polyp gets a disease, it tends to spread very quickly to most of the other polyps living in that colony, okay? Something to be mindful of when you do snorkel at a coral reef, whether it's this year, next year, or 10 years from now. Okay, time for some more trivia. So, game face is on. If you're using that worksheet, you can just write it in right on your worksheet. If you want to type in your answers so I can see them, go for it. I would love that. If you just want to scream out your answer loud and proud so that everyone, wherever you are, thinks that you're really smart, that's cool too. Okay, whatever works for you, works for me. This one should be pretty simple. This is an easy yes, no for you. I want you to tell me, should you ever touch coral? Okay, that's all you need to know. Give me a yes or a no. I'm going to give you a few minutes to catch up. I know there's a weird lag too. Good. Most of you are saying no. I hope that's a pretty easy one for you guys to figure out. You don't want to ever touch coral. There's never a good time to be touching coral. It's just unnecessary, really. Okay? All right, game face back on because we got some more trivia coming right at you. Okay, so that one was easy, right? A yes or no. I want you to tell me now, and again, you can write it on your worksheet or type it in, whatever you want. I want you to tell me why we should not ever touch coral. What's the reasoning? That's important to know because you guys can share this information with other people, but you want to be able to explain to them why, okay? The reasoning behind it, why touching coral is not a good idea. It's kind of a bad idea. I'm going to give you a minute to think about that. Good, it'll damage the mucus layer. Very good, Joshua. I can tell we got a bunch of smarties on here. I love it. Good, we can't touch the coral because we wipe away that mucus membrane and then we're leaving the corals susceptible to getting disease. Very good, you guys. Okay, now, this is a very zoomed in, close-up picture one of the marine lab instructors took. I really love it because it shows us what the corals look like when the tentacles are retracted. So each of these is a coral polyp living in their happy little colony. And this one, the coral polyps, the tentacles are retracted, they're pulled in. And that's generally what we would see during the daytime. Now at nighttime, the tentacles are out and about. They're reaching around trying to get food. And that's because our corals are nocturnal animals, okay? They're reaching out for food, trying to get that plankton, because that's generally when they eat. Most species of coral eat at nighttime. They're nocturnal, most active at nighttime. Not all corals follow our rules, but for the most part, they do, okay? Trivia question. Here we go. Game face on. You have that worksheet, you can fill it out, you can yell this out, type it in, whatever works for you, okay? I want you to tell me what word, and I think I said it a few times, what word describes an animal that is most active at night? Most of our corals follow this, or this type of animal. What word describes an animal that is most active at nighttime? Good, very good, you guys. Everyone's getting this one. Nocturnal. Nocturnal's our word. That's the vocab word of the moment. Very good. Okay, back to our corals. Now, I said that corals are closely related to jellyfish, right? They're in the same phylum as jellyfish and anemones, like you guys told me. When I think jelly, I tend to think clear, okay? They don't usually have color associated with them. And corals are the same way. Most corals are actually clear, but if you've been lucky enough to swim at a coral reef before, you may be questioning that a little bit, because when you swim around at a reef, you tend to see color associated with our corals. Here in the Florida Keys, our corals tend to look brownish, greenish, yellowish, that kind of thing, but they definitely have a color associated with them. That color isn't coming from the coral itself, but it's coming from an algae that lives inside of the coral polyp. That algae is what gives coral its color, okay? And that algae has a big fancy word. It is called zooxanthellae. Zooxanthellae. And our zooxanthellae lives in a coral's belly. Zooxanthellae in the coral belly. Zoo, Z-O-O, animal. Hey, zooxanthellae, animal, golden plant. It's not an animal at all, okay? It is an algae. That's important to remember. But it's an algae that you're going to find inside of all of our coral polyps. Now, the question is, why? Why does the zooxanthellae live inside of a coral polyp? And I'm so glad you asked. Because our corals are dependent on that zooxanthellae. Corals can only survive for so long without the zooxanthellae, all right? And that's because zooxanthellae use the sunlight to make their food. They photosynthesize, just like all plants do. And in doing that, they use the sunlight, they make their food, and they share that food, that energy, with the corals. And while our corals do feed on plankton at nighttime, they get the majority of their energy from that zooxanthellae, okay? But here's the deal. The zooxanthellae, they like living in the coral belly. And that's because it's a nice, safe place for these algae to live. Remember, corals have stinging cells. That means that there's not a lot of animals or predators that want to eat our coral polyps. They have to have specialized feeding systems in order to feed on corals with these stinging cells. So this relationship that the corals and the zooxanthellae have is a mutualistic, symbiotic relationship where it's two organisms working together and both are benefiting. It's a win-win for both the corals and our zooxanthellae. Okay, here we go. This one's a little bit different because no matter where you are, whether you are here in the Keys or you're in Florida, you're somewhere else in the country, or maybe even out of the country, I don't know. We're all gonna say, on the count of three, wait till I say three. The count of three, loud and proud, we are all going to say the name of the symbiotic algae that lives within a coral polyp. If you can say it now, you can say it whenever, and press all of your friends, just yell this word out. Everyone will think that you're the smartest person in the universe. Okay, here we go. Is everyone ready? 1, 2, 3. Zooxanthellae. Good, you guys. I'm gonna pretend like I could hear you. No matter where you are, just everyone screaming this magical word. Good. Okay, moving on to the types of coral. If you guys have that worksheet, you can fill in zooxanthellae for that question there. Try to spell that one. That one's a tough one. Has Z's and X's and everything. Okay, moving on to the different types of corals. There's all kinds of different ways to break down the types of corals that are out there in our waters. But in general, there are 3 types of corals to keep in mind. Stony corals, flexible corals, and soft corals. Those are the 3 main types. Our stony corals, those, just reading your guys' comments. The stony corals, those are the reef building corals. So that's generally what people think of when they think of coral, I would think of. The stony corals are the ones secreting that limestone skeleton. And that limestone, that's the reef, okay? That's the thing that's underwater, wave resistant, and providing that 3-dimensional structure, attracting all of those animals. So the stony corals are the reef building corals because they're the ones producing that limestone, all right? A little bit different from our flexible and soft corals. Just as important, of course, okay? Our stony corals, we can break down a little bit further into the stony boulder corals. They're the ones that are shaped like big boulders. And the stony branching corals. Those are the ones that have a bunch of branches on them, okay? Looking at this example here of a stony boulder coral, this species, I have a feeling a lot of you may know what this one is. So I'm going to pause for a moment and see if you guys can figure this one out. If you know what species of stony boulder coral that we're looking at here. Our boulder corals in general are pretty slow growing, but the boulder corals, like the brain coral, hopefully that's what you were thinking. Okay, that's the species of stony boulder coral that we're looking at here. Our stony boulder corals are really slow growing, but in perfect conditions, that's not really a problem because they're big boulders, so they look pretty darn hardy, okay? And they are. So if we had a big storm and waves are crashing down on this, the stony boulder corals generally hold up pretty well, okay? And brain coral, of course, is a great example of that. That's a little bit different from our stony branching corals. If you look at the species here, up top is our elkhorn coral, down below is our staghorn coral. You can see these branches, they would break apart a little bit easier than the stony boulder corals. Okay, our stony branching corals, they're stony corals, so they're secreting that limestone. So that polyp, that coral polyp, it's an animal. It has a zooxanthellae, the algae living inside of it. And then our stony coral polyps are actually secreting that limestone, and that's making the reef. Our stony branching corals, like you see here, elkhorn, staghorn, for example, compared to the boulder coral, if big waves are crashing down on top of these, you can tell they would break apart a lot easier. And in fact, that's okay, and they're kind of supposed to do that. Stony branching corals prefer to live in shallow, high-energy areas where waves crash down on top of them because they rely on fragmentation for reproduction. So the waves crash down, a piece breaks off. As long as that piece can find some nice bare limestone to settle on, a whole new coral will grow. Now, something important to point out is both of these species of corals are protected right now by the Endangered Species Act. We don't have a lot of stony branching corals left. And a big reason for that is we have so much nutrients in our water here in the Florida Keys and a lot of other tropical and subtropical locations. The nutrients causes algae to grow. Algae is covering that limestone, and then it makes it really hard for those fragments to find some bare limestone to settle on. So they just roll around and roll around, and some fragments eventually don't make it at all, okay? Okay, our 3 types of corals: stony coral, talked about those, the reef building coral; flexible coral, like you see here; sea rods up top, sea fans down below. Flexible corals are the ones oftentimes people confuse with plants. They kind of look more like plants than animals, but they're corals, which means they aren't animals, just slowly moving back and forth in the current. Up top is a sea rod, sea fans. We have lots of beautiful sea fans in our reefs here in the Florida Keys, which is awesome. And our third type of coral is soft coral. Now we do have soft corals here in the Florida Keys, but they're really deep. So you'd have to be like an amazing free diver in order to spot any of the soft corals that we have here. Okay, here we go. Game face is on. Time for some trivia. Enough talking. I'm going to pause for a moment. See what you guys can do with this one. If you have the worksheet, you can fill it out. You can yell this out loud and proud. You can type in the answer so I can see it. I want you to tell me or write down what are the 3 types of coral. 3 types of coral. Just pausing for a moment so you guys can pull it together. See what you can do with this trivia. You're doing awesome. Pretty impressive so far, I will say. Good, very good. So many good answers. Good, everyone's getting it. Stony, flexible, soft. You got it. Our 3 types of corals. Very, very good, you guys. All right, next trivia. Here we go. I want you to tell me which of the 3 types of coral, stony, flexible, or soft, are the reef-building corals. Remember, the reef, that's anything that's underwater, wave-resistant, provides structure. Okay? Which of our 3 types, stony, flexible, or soft, is actually creating that reef, that 3-dimensional structure? One of the 3 types is secreting what makes the actual reef out there. Good, you guys. Good. Our stony corals. The stony corals are the reef-building corals. Those are the ones secreting that limestone skeleton. And that limestone, that is the reef. Okay, moving on to coral reproduction. This is probably my favorite of coral ecology. It's just so interesting how these really simple animals reproduce. Our corals utilize both sexual and asexual reproduction. Sexual meaning 2 parents, asexual meaning 1 parent. They reproduce sexually through an annual event, something that happens 1 night out of the whole year, called simultaneous mass spawning. And they reproduce asexually throughout the whole year, using budding or fragmentation, which we talked about with our stony branching corals. So this simultaneous mass spawning event, and hopefully you guys can see this video, 1 night out of the whole year, same species of coral all through the Florida Keys and Caribbean Reef Tract, same night, at the same time, will release their gametes into the water. It's really pretty incredible, okay? Scientists are generally able to give us a good time frame of when they expect this to happen, meaning like, oh, this species will go 3 days after the full moon, or this one will go 5 days before the full moon. But they never know for sure exactly what day or exactly what time. And if you're a big science geek, like most of us at Marine Lab are, we, after working all day and night, we'll jump on a boat, we head out to the coral reef, we cross our fingers, and we hope that we're there the right night at the right time, because really this is one of the absolute coolest things that you can ever see out at the reef, I think, in my opinion. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to see this a few times now, which is really lucky. And good for our corals. We need them to be making their babies. So this type of spawning is called simultaneous mass spawning, when they release all of their gametes all at the same time, okay? Now this can certainly be a good method of spawning because some of them are bound to survive, have got to make it, but the negative is it attracts a whole bunch of predators, okay? With all of this yummy protein in the water, a lot of the animals are going to come and chow down, basically. Hopefully some of them survive. We get a little planula, that's a baby coral, metamorphosizes into a polyp, and once we have a polyp, that's when asexual reproduction through budding takes over, okay? And then over time, we're going to get that colony of coral polyps that we talked about that are all connected to one another. Okay, trivia time. Here we go. Get ready. Worksheet, yell it out, type it in, whatever's working best for you, wherever you are. Been pretty impressed with some of these answers so far. I want you to tell me if corals reproduce sexually or asexually. Do corals reproduce sexually or asexually? A little bit of a trick question, but I feel like you guys can figure it out. Seem pretty smart. Just going to pause for a moment because there is an awkward delay on the old Facebook Live. But I suppose that's to be expected. Very good. Oh, even having some answers texted to me. Good, you guys. Corals use both forms, both sexual and asexual reproduction. Very good. Okay, now, everyone knows that coral reefs are so diverse. There's so much to see when you go to the reef. I never get bored going to the coral reef because every time I go, I see something that I have never seen before. But here's the deal. There's a reason that coral reefs are so diverse, okay, that the community at a reef is so diverse. And it all has to do with the environment. It has to do with ecology, that connection of the community and the environment. Now, if you look at this weird old graphic I've got going on here, these numbers, all the numbers within each of these squares are telling us the number of patch reefs within that square. So here, off of the upper keys, we've got 1,590 patch reefs. If you go further south, off of the middle keys, there's only 50. There's a really good reason for that. Corals need stable environmental conditions. Florida Bay is not a stable body of water. It's not supposed to be. It's an estuary, fresh water. It's constantly flowing into Florida Bay. It often brings nutrients with it, okay? Key Largo, this big island, is blocking a lot of that flow of water from Florida Bay from getting out to the ocean, as opposed to the middle keys, where the islands are much smaller. A lot of that fresh water carrying nutrients goes through these smaller islands, and it makes the environmental conditions out here much less stable, okay? So basically the environmental conditions up here just are better for corals. It's just a better environment for the coral community, okay? In order for corals to have a nice, healthy looking community like this picture, They need very specific conditions, okay? And this list is certainly not all-inclusive, but it gives you an idea of some of the things corals need. Why we don't see corals all over the place, everywhere. They need stable salinity. That's referring to the amount of salt in the water. Abundant sunlight. Remember, corals are animals. They're not photosynthesizing, but that algae, the zooxanthellae inside of them, is photosynthesizing. Needs sunlight. Corals need low nutrient levels. There's a lot of nutrients, algae grows, moderate wave action, moderate water temperature, and lastly, a balanced biological community. Basically what that's saying is there's so many different animals that live out at the coral reef, but if you take one animal away or add one animal, it's going to affect everything else out there. And a good example of that is with the diadema sea urchin. Okay, these things used to be all over our reefs. In the 60s and 70s, divers would even complain about them because there were so many urchins and they were getting stabbed and they didn't like it. In the 80s, a disease spread through the population of urchins, and we had this huge die-off of the diadema urchins. At first, everyone was excited until they saw our reef starting to look like this, covered in algae. All right, the loss of that one species made all this algae grow, and that's because those urchins are actually key herbivores on our coral reef. And then this algae covering everything, all of the coral, affected all the other animals that lived there. All right, so that balanced biological community is really important in addition to those other environmental aspects that we talked about. So, trivia, here we go. I want you to name 3 abiotic. Abiotic means environmental, non-living conditions that are necessary for a healthy coral reef. So the balanced biological community with the urchins, that was one, but then there was that whole other list of environmental conditions that corals need to survive. And really, one of the most common words on that list was stable. Because really, our corals need a nice stable community or environment. You can also just be thinking about, why don't we see corals up north? Okay, what are the environmental conditions here that you don't see in other places? Hopefully you guys are thinking of things like stable temperature, stable salinity, some wave action. Oh, I'm seeing some good answers, you guys. Low nutrient levels, that's really important. The sunlight, very good, you guys. The zooxanthellae need that sunlight. Good, I love it. You guys got it. Love having smart people on this. You're making my job much easier. Okay, nice, pretty, healthy, beautiful reef scene. This is what we like to see. This is happy thoughts, okay? Ooh, this one, not so good. Not happy thoughts. Not liking this one so much. Now, there's a lot of reasons why our reefs may be looking like this as opposed to like this. There's all kinds of disturbances and threats that coral reefs all over the world are facing, okay? Some of these disturbances are because of people, things people are doing. Other disturbances are just natural, okay? Natural disturbances that may happen to corals no matter what, okay? I'm gonna pause for a second. I'm gonna see what you guys already know. Can you tell me some disturbances to the coral reef? And they can be man-made or natural or both. Just think about it, because unfortunately the list of disturbances can be pretty long, pretty scary. I'm going to show you this long list of scary disturbances, but I'm also going to show you the long list of all the good stuff that's going on for our coral reefs. I don't like to be a total Debbie Downer. So take a moment let's pause, see if you guys already know some disturbances. I have a feeling you do. Good. Warm water, the increased temperatures of our oceans worldwide, that's a big problem. Good, Nikki, the amount of nutrients in our water, that's a huge problem, especially here in the Florida Keys. When we get all of those nutrients, that's when algae starts to grow, okay? Coral and algae, they're competitors, competing for light, competing for space. Very good, you guys. All right, let me show you my list. And again, these are not all inclusive by any means. We could add a lot more to both sides of these. But to give you an idea of some of the icky bad stuff that's going on in our coral reefs, especially here in the Florida Keys, this kind of gives you an idea. Some of these natural influences, corallivores, that's just animals that feed on coral, that's natural, right? Corals are animals, they can get disease, just like any other animals can get disease, you know, and that can be natural, just something that happens. One of the human influences that I definitely need to make a point of is global climate change. Okay, I'm sure you guys have heard of this. And coral reefs are not unique as a habitat that are being affected negatively by global climate change. This is negatively affecting habitats all over the world in one way or another. Some of the unique circumstances that are happening to corals because of global climate change have to do with the increasing water temperature. Some of you guys pointed out corals need warmer water, but they need more than anything a stable water temperature. So the water can't be too cold, but it also can't be too warm. Otherwise, they just completely stress and freak out and generally don't survive, okay? The other thing that's happening with global climate change in our corals is the ocean is becoming more and more acidic. That's an issue for corals because limestone is basic. So not a good mix for our poor corals there. The other thing to think about is oftentimes human influences cause these natural problems, or in some instances, basically make them worse. So think about disease may be a natural issue for corals, just like all animals get disease, but in warm water, there's just more disease. So that increasing water temperature is causing more coral disease out there. Certainly not a good thing, okay? Okay, so this list is really scary and long, but I don't like to dwell on it too much because there's all kinds of really good things that are going on. I'm going to focus on some of the things going on here in the Florida Keys, but there's all sorts of reef protection efforts going on worldwide, really. And again, this list is not all-inclusive. There's all sorts of stuff that people are doing to help our coral reefs, but some of the big things going on here have to do with protected areas, education, mooring buoys, which I'll show you what those are, restoration efforts, and of course research and monitoring, just trying to learn as much as we can to help us save the coral, okay? Here in the Florida Keys, fortunately, we have a pretty good protection system. All of our corals are protected by the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, which has all kinds of different rules and regulations and things like that. The sanctuary doesn't only protect the corals, but also the mangroves and the seagrass, which is really important because our corals can't survive without a healthy inshore ecosystem. Education. Right now, all of us together are doing our part to help our coral reefs. Education, knowing more, goes a long way. Just being knowledgeable and understanding can help. You guys, from now on, as you move forward, one day when you do get to go out and snorkel at a coral reef, be mindful of where your hands and your fins are, and then tell the other people that you're swimming with, hey, watch out, don't kick the coral, and then tell them the reason why. Explain that mucous membrane to them. And that's you just doing your part, educating others. Mooring buoys. This is a really simple thing that we have here in the Florida Keys, and you're going to find elsewhere in other parts of the world as well. But basically, we have so many tourists that come down here. The sanctuary has gone out, and they've put these permanent anchors in right next to some of our best reefs. Okay, they're anchored in, obviously not on the reef, but right next to the reef. And then there's a line attached to the bottom, goes up to a buoy that's floating at the surface. When we drive our boats up, we just grab this line right here, and we're able to tie our boat up to that line. This means we don't have to worry about tossing our anchors into the water and causing any kind of anchor damage for our corals. Nice, easy, simple solution. All kinds of research going on. We're so fortunate down here to have so many different universities and organizations and nonprofits and all of these people just trying to do as much as they can to learn as much as they can about these habitats, because the more we know, the more we'll be able to protect our coral reefs and come up with the correct rules and regulations for the sanctuary, that kind of thing. Now, along with that research and monitoring, what I want to point out to you is that you guys can be a part of this too. I know that a lot of you listening were supposed to be coming this year to Marine Lab, or maybe you have come this year, or you've come in previous years. Hopefully you'll make your way down here at some point. Even if not, you can be a citizen scientist no matter where you are. A lot of the students that come down to Marine Lab, they collect all kinds of data depending on the program that they choose. We train them how to collect the information, and then we share that information with scientists, whether it's doing coral surveys or fish surveys, collecting different water samples, counting up microplastics. There's all kinds of things that citizens can do, but you don't need like a PhD to collect some of this information and still be giving valuable data to scientists that can analyze it and kind of make sense of it all. Okay, another really cool thing going on down here with different universities and nonprofits even are some really cool restoration efforts where they actually are growing corals, sometimes in nurseries, like in situ nurseries that are in the inshore waters. Some places are growing corals actually in the labs. And then once the corals are large enough, they take these corals and they outplant them on the reef. And then we cross our fingers that they survive and make it. Pretty cool. All right, trivia time. You guys have made it through most of this. This is an important one. This is what I want you to think about. What can you do at home, no matter where you are, to help protect our coral reefs? Because you don't have to be here hands-on actually planting the coral, for example. No matter where you are, you can play a part in helping our coral reefs here in the Florida Keys, or really the coral reefs in the waters anywhere. So I want you to think about that. Maybe something we talked about here, or maybe just something you know because you're really smart. Write this down on your worksheet, or just think about it. Type in some answers for me. Just want to give you a moment to think on this one. And it doesn't always have to be extravagant. Oh, I love that. Teach your friends. That's really good, Bradley. That's a really good answer. Educate others. Good. Recycle. Excellent. Good, you guys. Use less plastic. Amelia, recycle. I love it. Very good. so simple, but something that can really make a difference. Good job, you guys. We can all do our part. I love it. Use metal straws. Good. Tell people so they don't hurt the reef. Very good. Really good answers. We're all ambassadors for the coral reefs now because you guys are basically all experts. That is my lesson for you today. I'm going to give you a couple minutes if anyone does have any questions for me that I'm happy to answer for you. Otherwise, I just want to say thank you for joining me today. I know we're all living a weird life right now, and I just really miss teaching people, so I'm glad that I at least get to teach people virtually. Oh wait, let me see what Amelia says. Oh, from Wheaton. That's cute. I'm going to make sure that Kate knows that Amelia says hi. We're definitely, okay, so for those saying this, that you enjoyed it, thank you, I appreciate that, and we are going to continue doing things like this. The plan right now is Thursdays. Obviously, with the changing government mandates, we have to start to get creative on how we're going to do these things. But we do plan on continuing teaching virtually as long as this is going on. The other thing is, all of these lessons and labs and everything we're putting on our virtual website, so it is available to you. That site is posted on Facebook right now. So if you missed this, or if you missed part of this lesson, or if you want to share this with other people, just send them to that site, and they'll be able to access all of this material there. Okay, let me see some of these questions you guys are asking. What is your favorite thing you've seen while snorkeling at a reef? Oh my gosh. You know, Nikki, I've been so lucky to have lived down here for a long time that I've seen so much cool stuff. And it depends on the day what my answer is, because seeing a manta ray, that was really exciting when I was diving with some marine lab students. That was a really cool sighting. But also some of the coolest things that I've seen are some of the small invertebrates that live in the mangroves, honestly. There's just so much exciting things that live in our waters here. There's a lot to get excited about, I'll tell you that much. Ooh, Michelle was on a sailboat and cruised from Boston to Florida and the Bahamas. Oh my gosh, that's so lucky. You're living the dream. You're welcome, you guys. I'm so glad that you joined us. Anne asked, has the water turbidity been clear since tourism is stopped? I would say not noticeably, but that's not surprising. There would definitely have to be more lag time. It would be too soon to see anything noticeable as of right now. But, you know, there's always that silver lining to bad stuff. And that's a lot of people's thought, that the environment could be benefiting from this whole worldwide pandemic that's going on, since we all just have to sit at home. So it's always nice to look at the good things that are going on. Okay, someone's asking where the link is for the slides. If you go on our Facebook page, that link has been posted multiple times, and when I finish up here, I'm going to post it again. If you go to the virtual website and then click on classes, it'll say, oh, but it doesn't have the slides. The slides aren't up there, but I'm going to put the slides up there for you. We'll take care of that today so that you can have those. That's no problem. All right. Thank you for joining me today. It was so nice seeing a lot of familiar names on here, seeing a lot of familiar school names. We really miss our schools, that's for sure. Oh, yes. Okay, so Rachel just posted that our virtual site, and we're going to add, so you can click on there, you can get the worksheet, and we're going to add this slideshow to that virtual site so that you guys can access this as well. And if you need anything in the meantime, just send us a message on Facebook. I've never been so active on social media as I have been in the past few weeks. Thank you, guys. I'm going to sign off. It's been a really fun hour. Thank you. I appreciate you guys joining in. It would be pretty boring without you guys here. So enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll be hopefully talking to you guys next Thursday. You guys can send me any requests for any labs or lessons or whatever you want to hear about or learn about or see. All right. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.